Hey you, this is Jasim from CodeBan, and in this video I'm gonna be talking about authentication in Laravel. So if you are new to my channel, please do subscribe my channel and click the bell icon near to it. So without any further, let's jump right into it. Alright guys, so we'll be using the official documentation for the Laravel authentication. So I'll put this link in the description section so that you can follow along. Now the reason why we use the official documentation is because it has got a lot of things. It has got every single aspect of authentication covered, so that's why we'll follow this one. So before moving into the actual part, let me clear the things first, which means I have created a new Laravel project here, a fresh Laravel project, and I'll just make that database configurations up and running. So I'll just change this name to something like Laravel Auth DB, and I'll be using the default MySQL. So my exam is running, and I'll just migrate that stuff there. So I'll just say PHP artisan migrate. Now this will there is an issue there. Yeah, sorry for that. I haven't created that database there, so I'll just create in my PHP myadmin. I'll just create a new database, Laravel Auth DB, and I'll just create new one. Now I'll just migrate my migrations here. So all those things are migrated. Now if I look into that Laravel Auth DB again, you can see that we have that sort of tables there. So the first thing, the basic thing that you have to be aware is that in the project, if we go to app, you can see something like user.php. Now this is the default user model that comes built in with Laravel, which means if we look into the corresponding migration file in the database migrations, you can see the create users table here. Now this is the table that represents a user model, which means it has the fields like name, email, password, and all those stuffs there. Now this, if you try to if you try to register a user or log in a user, then this table will be referred at the end, at the back end of the Laravel authentication. So this is the basic thing that you have to be aware of. Now you can see that the migration file does that users table there. So everything is perfect. Now the next thing, back into the documentation, you can see that if we go to the introduction section, the Laravel authentication systems comes out of the box, which means if you say something like, hey Laravel, I want the authentication in my project. So if you say Laravel something like that, I want authentication, then with just 2 lines of command, you get that whole lot of functionality, which means you'll get the corresponding routes, the controllers, the middlewares, everything you will get out of the box if you want to use the authentication in your project. So that 2 commands, I'll come back. If we just go down, you can see that there is something called these 2 commands. Now these are this at the end says Laravel that, hey, I want to use authentication in my project. So that's these 2 commands. Now prior to Laravel 6.0, the command was something different. Like we used to say like PHP artisan make auth. This was the command used prior to version 6.0, but from 6.0 the authentication implementation becomes different. Now it has moved to a separate package called Laravel UI, so you need to just install that package and just call the method. Now only the implementation changed. The other things, the underlying logic and all, is same as in the previous version. So what we are now going to be using is, we are using authentication in our project. So we are just saying, hey Laravel, I want to use authentication. So I'll just copy this one and I'll just paste so that we install the Laravel UI. Now this will take a little bit of time, so please be patient, and I'll be back once it's done. Alright guys, so everything went fine, and with that being said, if we look back into the documentation, the next command we need to have, now this just installed the Laravel UI. Now we need to say that, hey Laravel, we need to make the authentication in the project. So just copy this line of command here and just paste it over there, and it will, simply test the thing. You can see that the authentication scaffolding generated successfully. So with this command, if we go back into the documentation, it says it created a lot of steps for us. Like if we look back into something like the app HTTP controllers, you can see a new folder is being created, which is called Auth. Now in the Auth folder, you can see a lot of controllers there, such as the login, register, and the passwords, and all those controllers are automatically generated for us with this one command. Now this is not enough. If we go to the routes web.php, then you can see a new line here is added, which is auth : routes. Now this at the end will give you the routes such as /login, /register, and all those routes. Now if I just if you want to get a clearer understanding of what this does, you can just say like php artisan, I believe it's route : list, which will list all those routes in your web.php. So if we look I believe it's not in the web.php, the overall routes in your entire project. So if we look in here, you can see that there is a home route. Now that's again the new route created by the Laravel. Now we'll talk about this in a moment. Please be patient. So what this does, this line of code does, is it created the routes such as login, logout, password confirm, then password, email, reset, and token, register. Every route is built in with this single line of code there. So that's what is the line of code does. Now the next thing I have to say is that if we look into the exact project, if I say something like I'll open a new tab there, and I'll say php artisan serve. If I serve my application, and if I go to that corresponding URL there, you can see that we got that default homepage there. But if we go to something like /login, then you can see a page rendered there. That's the default page rendered by that auth : routes in the web.php. There is a route called /login, which gives you this sort of default one. Now the view that is rendered is, if we go to the resources folder, and in the views you can find that there is something called the in the auth folder, you can see that there is something called login.blade.php. Now this is the page that is rendered here. Now of course you cannot see some styling here. That's because we'll fix that in a moment, but the idea is you have to be aware of this page, because if you want to if you want to modify this page, you can of course do that. And that's about the login page. Now similarly, you can find something like /register, which will again give you a page for registering a new user, and again that's the register.blade.php. Now all these things comes out of the box. You get that with just one command that we have written before. So you also get I have talked about the /home. Now what this this route does is, if a user is successfully logged in, then he should be redirected to this page, the /home. Now that's the default behavior. You can of course get rid of that default behavior. We will discuss that in a moment. Now the /home, there is a controller which is automatically generated. You can see that there is a home controller there. Now in here you can see that it returns a view of home. Now that is again this view, this home.blade.php. Now you'll get to this page once we actually log the user in. So before moving into all those steps, one thing I have to mention is in the database, if we go to the database migrations, Now you can see there is a new migration file created, which is the password resets table there. So that's again the default out of the box given by the authentication system. So what we'll do is we'll just we'll just migrate all those stuff so that we get that functionality. So that's migrated. Now the next thing we'll fix is the styling. Now if we go back a little bit up, you can see that there is something called this one. You can see, please run npm install and npm run dev. Now if you want to get that styling up and running, you just have to just copy these two commands, that particular command, and just click enter, and that will test the thing. Now this again will take a little bit of time. Now what this at the end, you might be wondering why npm and all. Now npm is not package manager. Now I'll give you a brief introduction. Laravel comes out of the box support for Vue.js, which is a JavaScript framework, and we can tweak that Vue to React or Angular. That's up to you. There are configurations for that. Now the idea is the system, the ecosystem at the end uses SCSS or SAS to make use of the styling and all. So we need to compile those SAS files to get the actual CSS files, the bundled files, so that the exact styling is applied in the login, register, and those pages. So you don't have to bother about those things right now, because it at the end if we just run these two commands, it'll test the magic for us. You just have to bother about that for at present. So it'll take a little bit of time again, and I'll be back once it's done. Alright guys, so it compiled successfully as it says here, but if you have or if you went into some errors here, as I have went it at the first time when I ran this command, there was something like some errors like cross-env is not recognized or something similar. Then I have something for you. You can find a link in the description to this Stack Overflow question. Now this is at the end that exact same error that I got. Now this might be very similar type of error you might be facing at the time of running those two commands there. So if that is the case, all you have to do is just remove the node modules folder. You can see a node modules folder here. If we look into, let me say, yeah, this folder, just get rid of, just delete this folder, and the next thing is just get rid of this package lock.json file. As you can see in here, package lock.json, not this package.json, the lock file. You just get rid of that, and the next thing is run this command, clear the cache, third command. Now after that, now npm install cross-env, run this command, npm install, npm run dev, and these commands will give you the same result, same exact result without any errors. So if you face some issues like that, please do these kind of things here, and you'll of course get something like this one at the end. So after this one, now if I get back into my application, if I just refresh the registration page, you can see that those stylings are now successfully applied. Now this is actually a working authentication system. You can actually give your details and register a new user. Suppose if I say like I'll make a new user, admin, and I'll make the admin at admin.com. Now this password fields has some validations, like if I say like admin as the password and click register, it says me that the password field must have at least 8 characters. So there are sort of validations which is automatically given to you by the authentication system. So I'll put an admin as the password, and I'll click register. Now it automatically redirected to me the /home page, and it says you are logged in. Now the default behavior is that if we register a new user, then he's also automatically logged in, and upon logging in he's redirected to the /home route. Now this this is kind of default behavior. Now you can of course tweak that default behavior as in the documentation. I'll give you an example of tweaking it. Now if I say I have said that upon logging in the user is redirected to this URL, this /home route. So in order to get rid of this default behavior, so which means if I want to redirect him to something like /dashboard, then all I have to do is, as in the documentation, in the route service provider, just get rid of, if you just take the section in the authenticating section, you can find this one, path customization. You can find this line of code in the route service provider. So if we go to the app providers, route service provider, you can see that this line of code there. Now this is /home by default. Now we can of course tweak that to something like /dashboard, and that will test the thing. Now we'll look that in action. So I'll just log out. Now everything is by default there. You can just log out, click log out, and that will log you out. Now you can see that there is a header there. Now if we try to log in that particular user that we have created, so admin@admin.com and the password being admin, and if I log in, then you can see a 404 not found. That's because now it is redirected to /dashboard, which is at the case you cannot see a route for that /dashboard. That's why it's giving 404. So that default behavior is tweaked now to give you that /dashboard as the redirected URL. So I'll make the default one there. I'll just Control Z, and now what I will do, I'm gonna be showing you is, if I go to /home, you can see that message there, you're logged in and all. Now I'll just log out, and if I go back to that same /home again, you can see that I'm redirected back to the login page. Now that's because the /home route has a middleware called Auth, which at the end is nothing but, if a user is not authenticated, then he is not authorized to access that route, that /home. He cannot access that. That's the behavior that we have, that the Laravel has already set. Now if I just log in with that particular user, then you can see that I can go to that home section. That's now working. So if the user is not authenticated, then he's not able to access this route. Now where is that default behavior? If we come to I believe it's in the if we go to the web.php, then you can find this is the home route, and which at the end is at the home controller at index. Now the home controller and all is automatically generated by that particular command we use for authentication. So if we go to controllers, you can see home controller.php. Now here you can find an index, right? So up above the index method, you can see something like public function construct and this middleware auth. Now what this does is the magic. If the user is not authenticated, he's not able to access any of the methods written in this controller, in the home controller. Any of the methods is not accessible if the user is not authenticated. Now this is facilitated by making use of the middleware. If we go to the middleware section in the HTTP, you can find authenticate.php. Now this is at the end used as at here. So you don't have to bother about those things here. If you want to make this sort of functionality, all you have to do is just copy and paste this construct function in any of the controllers you want this particular functionality. Now in the documentation, it is clearly stated. If I go a little bit down, then you can see that in the protecting route section, you can see the exact same thing here. Now if you want a particular URL to be protected by that sort of middleware, then you can use this sort of syntax there. Now that's totally fine. Now this is one thing you have to make use of. Now the next thing in the documentation, you can see that you can retrieve the authenticated users. You can just say auth : user to get that user object, and if you want that ID, you can say auth : ID. Now you can get you can make this line of code in any of the controllers you could use. Now if I say something like in the home controller, if I go to the home controller, and in here in the index, I'll just fetch that particular user ID. So I'll say the authenticated user's ID is equal to, I'll just say auth, then colon, then ID, and that's it. As in the documentation, that's it. Now we need to import that auth from the facades there, so I'll just copy that line of code and I'll just import that up at the top. So with that being said, I'll just dd this user ID, so $user ID. Then if I go to that /home again, then you can see that ID there. Now yeah, it says undefined class constant ID. I believe, let me look back into the documentation again. Yeah, that's a function. I'm sorry for that. That's a method. So if we refresh that again, you can see that ID1 there. So that's working perfectly fine. Now that's, I believe, the basic introduction to the Laravel authentication stuff. So you can of course see that in the phpMyAdmin we got that in the users table we'll have that particular user there. You can see that admin@admin.com. Now the password, as you can see, is hashed. Now all these functionalities are by default built into the Laravel authentication. You don't have to bother about those stuffs. Now I believe that's the end of the basic authentication stuff with Laravel. So I hope you understood the complete logic behind it, and if you like the video, please hit the thumbs up button, and if you went into some errors or if you have any doubts in the concept, please let me know in the comment section. And that's it, guys. If you haven't subscribed my channel, please do subscribe my channel and click the bell icon near to it. So thank you for watching. We'll see you in the very next one.